Identify and book the world's best speakers for your next event. Mina Speakers is the leading speakers and MC bureau in the Middle East. We bring global talent to the region and have established the region as a key global hub for speakers. Inspire and motivate your audience. Find exactly what you are looking for by working closely with us to assist you in understanding the cost-benefit analysis tied to selecting a speaker for any event. Ensure that your audience is educated, engaged, and empowered. Connect with us for a quick response and tailored advice. Book your speakers now.
Good morning, good evening, depending upon what part of the world you're in. But one thing you have to realize is that if it's Friday, it is a CEO series where we bring together phenomenal people, backgrounds, careers, advice, authors. And today we are honored to have a good friend of mine. So let me give you a little background. Navid Nazemian was a speaker at an event in Mumbai, and he wowed the stage. Everyone was taking notes, and it was on executive transition. So he helps executives and their leadership teams accelerate and successfully transition into new roles. His new book is Mastering Executive Transformation Transitions, the definitive guide, and the #1 release, an international best-selling book. So we're honored to have him here today. So Navid, my friend, how are you? Haven't seen you since Mumbai.
Thank you so much, Ron. I mean, after that kind introduction, it makes me blush a little bit, but I'm good. I'm good. I'm really, really stoked to have this conversation with you. It's been some time until we have seen each other, and so really, really looking forward to this.
Yeah, it was back in February. So a little more background on that. He has been recognized as the most influential practitioner by HR Magazine, as the #1 coach of the year by CEO Today, and as 100 most iconic coaching leaders by CHRO of Asia, and has received the Outstanding Leadership Award from Education, where we did not meet, but we were both on the same stage. It's an honor to have you here.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Ron.
So, how did you get from, I always say, from university to where you are now? And I always like to start that off because we've all had career disruptions, U-turns, detours. Walk us through yours.
Yes. So first off, Ron, I wish I was having that strategic foresight 26 years ago when I finished university and started working. So my initial idea about work was I do what I am really good at. And a lot of people told me you're a great negotiator and you're a great relationship builder. And the function that seemed to benefit most from these two skills was the sales function. So this is, my most logical way of starting my first job as a sales associate. And I did those sales jobs for about 6 years and really was happy and successful. And then something happened. I met a very impactful HR person. This was the HR business partner kind of 1.0 version that I had never seen before. And she really changed my mind about the impact of the HR function and what it can really be standing for. And so I then kind of shifted careers and started working. And it was really hard because every single, and I was based in Germany back then, every single company that I wanted to get into at an entry level, mind you, HR position, they said, you don't have any relevant HR background. Why would we need to hire you? And so it took a lot of conversations and one convincing exercise with a lady called Dania Frech, who said, I'm going to hire you and you will be an unusual profile for the HR team, but you will certainly be unusual in a positive way because you will be the first HR person that's actually sold our products previously. and that was with the world famous three stripes Adidas. So that was my starting of the HR career. I never looked back since then. So I spent 20 most wonderful years in HR, having had the privilege of working for some of the world's most admired companies all around the globe.
So you reminded me when you said that because I did not mention that you were the former CHRO for Vodafone.
Yes, I was not the CHRO. I was the global head of HR,
Okay.
supporting the finance function, and that was roughly 27,000 employees worldwide. Yes,
Okay.
but CHRO is still in role. She came from Burberry to Vodafone.
Okay. One of the things you mentioned there that kind of connected with me, and I didn't know this before, your career started in sales. Mine started in sales. How was sales, the skill set that you learned from sales, knocking on, I'm going to date myself, knocking on doors and trying to sell a product, and how did that translate to what you're doing now?
Yes. So a few things. First off, and this was my struggle. This was I need to shape and sharpen that message to potential HR, heads, because they are the people that are going to hire me eventually. And so one of the things I realized is it's really helpful to have been a customer to the HR department, right? Because we can all be a little siloed in our own ways of being. And so I really felt that having been a customer to the HR function for 6 years in two different companies would be an asset. That was the first kind of starting point. The second thing I wanted to say is that whilst it may look a little bit of a stretch to move from sales to HR, when you think about it, if you think of the two core competencies that I mentioned to you, one of which is, negotiating, and the other one is building relationships. Actually, if I didn't say that I used to work in sales, you could think of that to be a very valuable asset for the HR function as well, right? Because what you do as a HR business partner, you keep negotiating on a daily basis with line managers and people leaders. What do you do? Have to get the buy-in? Well, I guess you need to start building relationships. So what I want to say with that is that you really have to think outside in to come to realization that sometimes these so-called cross-functional moves are actually quite helpful. And I certainly have also worked for organizations such as GE that were encouraging them. Like you couldn't grow beyond the mid-level management leadership roles if you didn't take on those stretch assignments. And so sometimes it was baked into the company culture that was encouraging people. If you're serious about your career, you need to start kind of moving out of your silo and getting cross-functional kind of experience under your belt.
Yeah. Being comfortable in an area that you're not comfortable in.
Yes, yes. As a coach, I like to say growth happens when you start to step outside of your comfort zone, and it's certainly true.
Mm. So, so let's take that to your book.
Mhm.
How did that come about? I mean, you've had a phenomenal career, global expert, but how did the book come about?
Okay, so first off, let me give away a little secret that not too many people know about, and that is I struggled for 6 years trying to write this book, right?
Uh, uh,
I'm a pretty ambitious guy. I am quite, knowledgeable about the topic that I was writing about, and I like to think of myself as someone who is a completer finisher. So if I put my mind into something, it won't take long for me to come to a conclusion and realize that potential. Now, what I didn't appreciate is that writing a book is a very different kind of process. So
mhm,
it's I like to think of writing a book, although it's a non-fiction book. So it's a thought leadership book. And that being said, it's a creative process, Ron. And if you try hard to be creative, you will struggle, which is what
yeah,
happened.
yeah.
The other factor that was leading to this was I had a life that was full on, right? I was an established executive traveling the world, A year after starting to think about writing a book, our son was born. In between those 7 years that took me from start to finish to write this book, there were 3 jobs in 3 different countries in 2 different organizations, right? And of course, next to my busy executive role, I was also coaching on the side and attending conferences. So the reality is, Ron, in a nutshell, life just gets in the way.
Yeah.
Now, if I wanted to look at it more positively, what's really good about it is, and I guess the same applies to a great meal, sometimes those processes take the time that they take. So trying to force it through, trying to, cut corners, it's not going to work. And I'm really glad. And of course, if you had talked to me after 6 years of struggling to write this book, I would not be a happy man. But today I can say probably one of the reasons why the book is such a success. I got testimonials from Marshall Goldsmith, from Dave Ulrich, you name the big gurus, they all have given very, very positive reviews about my book. I think part of that is because I took the time. Part of it is because I really grappled with this framework that I wanted to give to the readers of the book. And so it all took its toll and time, but the output and the final product is very satisfactory, at least to me. And it appears to be satisfactory to a lot more people as well, who are the readers and who are the thought leaders of this book.
Yeah, because they wouldn't call you in otherwise if they did not have the confidence you were going to bring value to that situation. But when you look at the whole body of work of human resources, and you mentioned two, good friends of mine. You mentioned, Dave, the other one that you mentioned. How did you choose out of all the body of work in human resources to talk through executive transformation? Marshall Goldsmith was the other. How did you? How did that niche become important?
Yeah. I mean, first off, I didn't have a working title initially when I started. I was passionate about writing a book that touches upon the topic of leadership, human resources, and coaching. So that was the starting idea. I didn't really know what niche am I going to go down into. I really didn't know what the framework would look like. I had no idea what is the red thread, in all of that. And this is probably part of the reason I struggled for 6 years. I met a guy through a recommendation called Eric Costa. I'm going to do a plug for him here. He's a professor at Georgetown University. He's a book writing coach. And, Ron, I will never forget this moment. This is like pandemic time. We are like a year into this horrible pandemic thing. And I'm kind of, stuck in my home office room in London. And Eric is clearly not someone who has worked in HR. He's definitely not an executive coach. Yeah. And he really didn't know anything about my book or the idea of me writing a book. I had written up 60 pages by then, which, again, you cannot consider that to be a book. It's a white paper at best. After 6 years, imagine. And so he said, before we get on a call, would you mind filling out this form? And the form was essentially his way of educating himself about the topic in a short, sharp way. And I did that. And when we jumped on a call, he said, look, Navid, I clearly don't understand anything about your subject matter expertise. I really have not worked with anyone before that has had quite the background that you have. But my high-level idea about your book would be this. It really hit me hard. Like, he gave me, in that 20-minute call, the roadmap to my book. That moment I will never forget. That really, I mean, I get goosebumps now that I talk about it. That really hit me hard, because all he did is to apply a proven method to say, my thread about what the little information you have provided to me could look something like this. What do you think? And of course, within 6 months from that and the work that I did with him and the Creator Institute, I created not only an additional 180 pages, but it became the book it is today. And so I can't emphasize the impact of working with a qualified coach, someone who knows what they are doing. And I would
Okay.
say today, if I had continued on my own, I would struggle probably the same way I did for 6 years up until today.
Okay. The other key point, I'm going to go back to Mumbai where we spent time together back in February. You had an evidence based approach to executive transitions. It wasn't just my thought, but it showed you my thought. Here's the data to back it up. It was all evidence based. And that's when I realized, okay, put the phone down, listen to this guy. And I started taking photos of slides you had. It was absolutely phenomenal. Walk us through that evidence based approach. Give us some highlights of executive transitions. In other words, a company goes out and searches and they spend all this money with search firms. Person comes in, gets into the role, and maybe not.
Yes. So first off, this is another moment of, coaching moment I had with Eric. In one of the calls, he said, "Look, you have been doing a lot of research. I appreciate that. What is the best-selling book in the category that your book will eventually launch at?" And I said, I need to dig it out. I don't know. Like it's the onboarding category. I don't even know if it exists on Amazon. And he said, don't worry about the technicality of it. What is the absolute best-selling book in that category? I said, it's super simple. It's The First 90 Days. The First 90 Days, written by Michael Watkins, published in 2003.
Yeah.
And back when Eric and I spoke, it had sold 1.5 million copies worldwide. And he said, thank you very much. And so the next call, he came to the topic again. He circled back on the topic and he said, look, Navid, I actually did something I want to let you know. I went ahead and bought that book. I read it. I did like it. It was a bit dated. And I did the following. I did a count of the citations in that book. And there is a total of 53 citations in that book, right? Now, mind you, that book has been written by a Harvard Business School professor.
Yeah.
Now, I did the same thing with your book, and I counted 156 citations. And no offense, but you're not a professor, at least not yet. So I
Mm.
think you can close down the research now, right? And again, these are moments of
Yeah.
realization. You think, oh my God, I had no idea. So I guess I can close down the research part. So one of the reasons why my book is so data heavy is because I am super high on learning approach in the Hogan assessment. And so I love a great piece of research. I love a great study. And of course, on a daily basis, this stuff is being produced, Ron. But as an author, at some point, you need to kind of close this back and say, this is enough data to make the point. And so that's why you can talk to me from any angle related to my topic, and I will be able to cite at least 3 great research papers or books that make the point that I make in my book. So one of the selling points about my book is you could go ahead and read all those 153, 156 sources. I listed them. It's 22 pages long, the citation part of my book. But actually, the value that my book gives to you is you just read my book and you're now smarter than having read all those 156 things in order. And so this is one of the reasons why it's so data heavy. Now, coming back to your point, it is actually true, and I didn't quite believe it the first time I read this, is that 40% of all executive transitions are a failure. Now, this is 4 out of 10 execs not making it. And I just couldn't believe that, because I know what it takes, from an HR perspective, how much work and energy and resource goes into hiring at that level or promoting into that level. And
Yeah.
despite all the best intentions and all the best efforts, as we know, 4 out of 10 don't make it. Now, there's an entire chapter in my book dedicated to that as to how come? How can this be? And without boring the audience about the top 10 reasons for executive transition failure, if I wanted to aggregate those top 10 reasons, Ron, it's people, it's culture, and it's politics, right? So it's not like you go and hire a CFO and he or she isn't really good with the numbers. It's impossible to hire a chief people officer and he or she doesn't know how to translate the business and the strategy through the people agenda and support that at the same time. So it's the soft skills that get in the way more often than not. And one of the most validated research findings that I could find is from Navid Nazemian, one of the largest search firms in the world, and they have placed over 20,000 executives over a 10-year time period, of which 40% didn't make it. Now, they are one of the best, and they haven't placed into the exact same organization. They have placed them into thousands of companies. And three other studies come to a very similar conclusion. So the 40% failure rate is absolutely validated.
Here's what caught me in your presentation, and this is feedback. Lots of times people give a presentation and it's about data, but you're not connecting with the audience. Your presentation talked about the data, and you wove it through the business case as to why this is important, and you made it understandable for an HR person could understand that. And you know what I mean by that? That's kind of an inside joke, but I can understand the data side, the number side, and this is important that we maybe we spend all this money on the conference of the world, all these executive search firms to bring these people in, and then it's kind of sink or swim. You kind of figure it out on your own. But your presentation was they need help, even if you bring them in and highly caliber, all these kinds of things, but they need additional help. And this is what connected me, and this is what caused me to put my phone down and stop messaging people.
Yes, there's something pragmatic about my way of being and my way of relating to topics, and I think that's sometimes helpful. So again, I sometimes see brilliant presentations by academic, scholars, and I wonder then, so now what, or so what? Like, how do I make use of this? What is a practical way of bringing this to life? Let me give you one more example. So the first 90 days, I loved the book. I got it as a present in 2008. It was already 5 years old then. And I really liked it. And then here's me thinking, how can I use some of these ideas in this book into my first 90 days as a new leader? Because that's why I got the book as a gift. Now, there is no way you can make use of that unless you sit down, and this is what I had to do. I created my own crappy Excel spreadsheet to try to take out some of the ideas in the book and make it a roadmap or a plan for myself, an action plan. Now, with my book, if people buy the paperback or the hardcover version, they get the actual workbook. That workbook is 31 pages. And the whole point of my book with the double diamond framework of executive transitions is people can take it and apply it to their own transition. If you're a coach, you can take my framework and apply it to a transitioning client. If you're the HR leader, you don't have a coaching degree or a coaching qualification, don't worry. You can still take my framework and work it through with the executive leader so that he or she de-risks their executive transition failure, accelerates their time to productivity, and ultimately is more engaged in that onboarding and transition period. So I find with sometimes brilliant ideas, if the bridge is missing into how can I take that and make it work, it's almost like a missed opportunity.
Yeah, you talk about that bridge because as you were going through your presentation, I'm thinking you would have thought that the search firm, you would have thought that the C-suite is bringing that person in, would have some kind of a plan for that transition. But in a lot of cases, it's not there because when you reference the number of failures at that level, that shows you right there there's a deficit. Something's wrong, and probably that was not. It was probably a case that was not given high level consideration.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and I make the case in my book with 6, in the presentation with 4 of the most successful companies on the planet, and how at the very top, at the CEO level, they had a transition failure. And so again, just making the point that it's not like, oh, all these crappy companies, they don't know what they're doing, they don't have the strategic HR, they work with low-level vendors, and guess what? As a result, 40% of the top appointments don't make it. No, 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 no. This is Boeing, this is Hewlett Packard, this is SAP, this is Uber. These are champions in their own right.
Yes.
Leaders of their respective industries, and yet they got this wrong. And this is the whole point that I'm trying to make. Hydrogen struggles doesn't work for peanuts. They are expensive. And yet, placements don't work out if we don't support them.
Yeah. So how can we get this message out? I mean, if you think of the moment we're in now, there's hundreds and hundreds of companies, and I see postings online. They're looking for all these leaders, and they go through all of this with the job description of what we're looking for. And I often think, after your presentation, are they giving any thought to, okay, we make a decision, okay, what now? How can we make that case of what now?
Yes.
After that selection is made, should that be a part of the process to try and find that talent?
Mm-hmm.
Because you would have, my thought was, after your presentation, I'm thinking, why didn't the executive search firms think through this? And that was a part of the package. Because if that's the case, I could bring you in, you do the search, you do the entire roadmap.
Yes. So this is a very tricky territory, Ron. I mean, first off, and I have to be careful what I say. First off, if your executive hired through any of the large search firms doesn't work out, it may not look good on the search firm, but actually it also doesn't look good on you as an organization. And by the way, you will be probably now a bit more desperate to bring the right person in. And all you can do is to either approach the same search firm or another search firm. And if you start to think this through, it may be not so bad for the large search firms in the end that 40% of execs don't make it, because guess what? That's bringing them business, right? I'm just calling it as it is. Now, I'm not saying there's any intent in this. All I'm saying is, if people keep coming back to buy a washing machine from you, that's certainly not bad for your washing machine selling business, right? It's as simple as that. Now, I also talk about what is it that you can do. In my book, I talk about 7 successful interventions to help your executive leader to succeed. And, there are multiple of those, but the easiest one, even if you're a lazy organization, you just want to make the investment and help them succeed, bring in an executive transition program. That's the simplest method. And this is when I spoke about the business case. The difference between, and it's like a, from to kind of type slide, from 2/3 of the company strategies failing because it's poorly or not well executed, to having a 90% likelihood that not just the exec, but its entire leadership team meets their 3-year performance goal. Looking at, commercials, flat or declining revenue growth and profit margins, to 2.5 times revenue growth and twice the increase in profit margins. Looking at the 40% failure rate versus bringing it down by a minimum of 50% in terms of the derailment risk, and as well as lowering attrition risk by another 50%. Looking at the replacement costs, which is, again, it's one of these HR truths. I learned as an assistant HR manager working with the world's most famous 3 stripes that an attrition costs about 2.5 times the salary cost of a normal employee. Right. Now, at the executive level is 30 times that number, right? If your CEO costs you a total of 1 million per year, if that gentleman or woman doesn't work out, that lady, it's a 30 million cost that you're looking at in terms of the ripple effects of that leader failing. And last but not least, if you look at the ramp-up time or time to productivity, as I call it, I cite 3 independent studies that all come to the same conclusion. Imagine if it generally takes 3 to 9 months for that executive to come to terms and start to give value back to the organization, because the initial time is like they're learning, they're trying to make sense, they're visiting key accounts and employees and stakeholders, they're listening to it. They're not really producing much. If you could bring that ramp up time or product time to productivity time by at least 50% or more, what would it be worth to you? And so this is, I think, the right, kind of conversations to have
Mm,
with
mm,
the HR, leader, whoever that is, with the CEO, with the chair of the board. So it all depends on who you're bringing in. There's always somebody who's in charge of that hire ultimately. And
yeah.
once they see the real business case behind, it becomes a no-brainer to start looking at what are the interventions we could look at. Now, in
Mm,
my book, I speak or I talk about the golden thread, right? Everything is golden in my framework and my book. There's diamonds in there, so I didn't want to take the red thread analogy. So the golden thread suggests that there are three distinctive stakeholders to align if you want to get this perfectly right. The first one is the executive leader. So there are concrete things the executive can do to de-risk their transition and support their counterpart. The second one is the coach, right? And so whoever's the support person, it could be a mentor, it could be a peer, it could be a qualified coach, but someone who is an outsider to all of this. And the third one is the organization, right? Whether it's the HR department, whether it's the chair of the board, whether it's the nominating committee
yeah.
head, no matter who the person is, if all these three stakeholders align on this intent, which is let's make this hire most successful, then you're talking about the ideal scenario and ideal setup.
Yeah, I'm smiling because I preach this every relationships of those key components. So in a lot of cases, they come in as some technical aspect. I got to increase revenue by X amount, market share by this and that, but I need to make sure I can connect throughout the organization. So not only from the board, but as well as the people inside of the organization.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes. I mean, I do a bit of work also on the process side. It's not the main activity of mine. And Ron, you would be shocked sometimes, when an organization contracts with me to look at this process on their behalf. And I say, can you please send me the risk register of your organization? They're like, what does it have to do with this process? I said, no, I'm just interested. And they send it to me. The one thing I notice is if it's not an updated one, the pandemic risk doesn't exist, or it's like a super low probability, super low
yeah.
impact, all that. Anyway, which is a funny thing now that we know what it could mean to your business model. Anyway, but the one thing that I'm oftentimes not seeing on this or not seeing as a high priority is risk of losing key talent,
Mm,
right? Now, then if I go back and say, can you do some number crunching, and none of these companies have it in their dashboard. They have to do it as a manual exercise. I say, what is your top level leadership? How do you call that? It's the top 100, it's the F250. There's always some number that's associated with that, depending on the size of the total cake. And then I ask them, how much attrition have you had over the last 24 or 36 months in that population? And then they come up with a number, and guess what? It's very close to the 40% number. And then I ask them the question, how come you did not put that on the risk register? Because you see now the data is telling you this is a key risk to the business. It's like
ah,
a business disruptor. And yet, because these are individual failures or appointments that don't work out, and there's
mm,
always good reasons why this one and that one didn't work out.
mm,
He didn't fit in to this organization culturally. She had the wrong leadership style. He was too much of it centered around his ego. He was not a great listener. You can use your own words to justify why someone didn't work out. What I find more helpful is the fact that all of them didn't work out. And what are you doing about it? And how can I help you to strengthen this process so that going into the future, you avoid these failures from happening as often as they do? Now, let me
yeah.
also say that there's no magic bullet in this, there's no magic formula. And the best you can do is reduce those risks. What you will never be able to do is to cut that risk entirely out, right? So all you can do is improve, and incremental improvement over time will give you a better output. But there's no such thing as you take this pill or you take this vaccine, and now you're immune against that disease as it stands.
So for the people that's listening in, this is why I put my phone down, because everything you talked about is, in a lot of cases, it's not connected to this search to bringing in that leader. And this is the underpinnings of success. And it kind of all brings it forward to, your clients as well as the entire organization that's looking for C-suite people, because they're concentrating on a certain, you look at a job description and all the things that they want, but the foundation is weak. And I think what you're talking about is the foundation of the organization, and how can we strengthen that? But in other words, give them some insights as to, what we need to do to figure it out. When you talk about the risk analysis
Yes.
approach.
Yes. Ron, allow me to circle back to something you initially asked me, which was, how did you make it to HR coming from sales? How did that
Yeah.
work out? How did you sell the story and so on? So one of the things I realized after I had made the move to HR is that there was very little understanding about the value chain of the organization. And what I mean by that is, if you sat down with, a peer of mine and said, what's generating value in our business? We sell product. Well, no, that's not my question, right? We sell all sorts of different products. We sell apparel, we sell footwear, we sell this. How is value generated for the shareholders ultimately? And how does it translate back into all these sales and so on? So that was an advantage I had, because I certainly had been on the more commercial side of the business. So it came a little easier to me to try to understand how this business works. Now, if I wanted to justify the same, lens, which is value creation to an organization, I cite two studies. The most validated one is from Russell Reynolds, and again, they are one of the best search firms out there in the world. And so they did this research, and they found that 90% of the cost that goes into an executive hire is made on the initial hiring process, right? Initial hiring process means the search firm fees. Sometimes there's a diagnostic or an assessment tool that they use. Interview time, by the search firm. Background checks by the background check firm. Interview time with internal stakeholders, because it's likely that at that level you're not just hired after one interview, but you're going to multiple rounds of interviews, sometimes with peers and panels and so on. And only 10% of the total cost is spent on that exact same hire once they have been hired.
Yeah.
Right? So if I wanted to unpack this through the value lens, I would say we have an imbalance of investment. We kind of front load this thing and take all the money toward the best search firm, and then kind of hope that they're going to work out. How about we dial up a little more this initial early investment in those leaders by helping them to succeed? Because one thing is for sure, if you have overspent on the 90% part and usually doesn't work out, all that money is gone down the drain, right? And so again, you not only have you not created value, but you have destroyed value, and you need to spend more now to make the exact same hire.
That's right.
That's another 90% coming your way, and my God, and also that happens. The second one doesn't work out. Ron, you can expect the following to happen.
Yeah.
The organization's reputation starts to kind of descend at dramatic speeds. Imagine if you're a top talent and I'm the search firm and I reach out to you and say, Ron, I've got a fantastic opportunity for you, and this and that and so on. And at some point, I need to review the name of the prospective employer. And guess what's your reaction going to be? I'm super happy where I am. Thank you so much for linking in. I'm good, right?
Go away.
All the first kind of bench level candidates are saying the exact same thing.
Yeah.
And so now what's happening is the organization, the search firm, are getting desperate. So they're going to what I call second level bench, right? So these are candidates that are not necessarily top talent, but technically, with a little bit of imagination, they could do the job. Now, they know exactly, like the top level candidate, that this is a high risk undertaking. This is maybe the last executive role that they will be doing in their career. And guess what's going to happen now? They say, okay, I see, yeah, I'm certainly up to the challenge. Hmm, write me this number on this check and I'll come and do it. Now, not only have you just doubled or tripled the total price for hiring a CEO, but what you're doing is you're hiring from the second bench, and that individual is coming in for the wrong reasons. And guess what's their appetite going to be like to transform, change, bring about anything that could be a little more disruptive to the BAU of that organization? They will want to glue themselves to that chair and be in it for as long as they can to cash in.
Yeah.
And then they're you pay their price as an organization. So how about the organization were to make that, I call it teeny tiny investment into the executive coach once that leader has been hired, so that they don't have to pay all this stuff down the line. But it's another perspective, which is through the value lens and looking at how much value can we create by making that investment versus how much value are you going to potentially destroy, and what is the total cost you pay down the line. The two studies aside, one of them says, if you look just at the S&P 500, this is a US number, and you look at what is the average cost of a CEO failure in the S&P mid-cap, mid-size type organization, it's $12 million. That's just the churn cost. It's not losing market share. It's not engagement levels are going down. As a result, it starts to translate into call center agents not doing a great job, sales leaders not going over and above to make extra sales, regular employees not going over and above the call of duty because they don't have the motivation to do that. And so that 12 million is just that gentleman or that lady that didn't work out, right? Now, again, what is the cost of hiring a transition coach? $40,000, $50,000? What is that in comparison to the total comp of the CEO who makes 1 million plus?
All the way here. Yeah. So, but as we talk through that, that's a business case behind that. So how would you, if you had to have a conversation with people, because we rebroadcast this in certain segments across the globe, how would you talk to these people that are in that phase of possibly looking for a C-suite executive to say, let's step back and strategically look through filling this role, from not so much of filling a seat, but strategically filling a seat in what you're talking about? What advice would you give them?
Yes. So, well, we are back to the business case that I spoke about all the commercials and so on. I think sometimes in organizations, and I've certainly, worked for 5 large corporates in my life, everything comes down to a business case. Right. So if you're the chief people officer, you want to make a business case to the exco or to the CEO, read my book, read that one chapter about the business case for successful transitions, and you will have enough data points to put it forward to say, we have looked at the end process end to end. We feel like we are very good at the front end, but we're not very good in the middle and towards the end. So this is the investment we're suggesting to make. Now, if they want to reach out to me, do reach out to me. I come and talk to your CEO. I come talk to your board. Over the last 3, 4, 5 years, kind of my coaching practice has moved up the value chain, also in terms of the clients that come to work with me. So it's more often that I talk not to the chairman or a chairwoman or the head of the NOMCOM than I actually talk to the CHRO or CEO. But even that, that's fine. So I will help you to make the business case as to why is this a worthwhile investment. And then the other thing I would say, Ron, is, even if you didn't want to screen the entirety of your process, this is another development that I have seen, sadly, going on in a lot of organizations. So here's the thing. Positively speaking, more and more organizations are optimizing their onboarding process. And when I say onboarding, it's the process that applies to every employee of the company. And so that means that before you're being hired, you sometimes have a choice to order your tech stuff, your laptop, your mobile phone, and so on. before you're being onboarded, all your information is taken. So on your day one, you have a working laptop, you have a working email, you have access to the right sites, you have access to the facilities, and furthermore, there will be a dedicated day in the month, each month, most likely, where it's like the onboarding day or the induction day, where all the new hires over the last 30 days are being invited to come and attend. And then you will have finance, marketing, sales, this, that, IT, and all the functions coming and presenting what it means to work in this organization, what it means to, contribute value to the company, all that. And of course, all the legal compliance stuff is taken care of because there's background screening, background checks happening even before you join. Now, this is wonderful, and it works for 99.5% of the organization. What I observe typically at the very top, this is your top 100 leaders, top 250 leaders, and the like, sometimes top 1,000. It's the organization has got 600,000 employees. Well, the top execs will be the top 1,000 or so. There are three things missing, which I refer to in my book as the higher value activities. So if you want to strengthen this process, all of what I just said, you need to get that right anyway. But it's nowhere near sufficient for the top execs. So three things you could look at are, to what degree do you help that incoming exec to align expectations both with the line manager and the direct reports, right? Now, part of what I do as an executive coach, I've got a signature year-long program that is focusing just on transitions, nothing else. And one of the activities I conduct on the executive's behalf is I reach out to a set of stakeholders and interview them on behalf of the exec confidentially. So let's say I recently had a group CEO of a FTSE company. So I went on and interviewed three of the board members plus the chairman of that board. And I interviewed a few of the direct reports of this gentleman. And when I did those interviews and I collected everything in terms of findings and presented back to him, one of my key findings was you need to align the board with the support of the chairman, because they seem to be having very different views about your mandate. Now, this is really, really dangerous. If board member one thinks you're here to do this, board member two thinks you're actually hired to do something completely different, you will not meet expectations. Not only that, you will start to disappoint members of the board. And this is the last thing you want to have. So again, it's one of the top three higher value activities. The second higher value activity is organizing meaningful meetings with key stakeholders. Now, again, good practice is what I have seen in some companies is they leave it to the incoming exec's PA and say, can you make some appointments in the diary? And the PA goes and plans some market trips, some peer conversations. Again, in my books, that's better than doing nothing. But with all respect, the competency level of a typical personal assistant is probably not the right level to determine who are actually stakeholders for this incoming exec. By the way, also externally speaking, right? If you're a CEO of a publicly listed company, it's quite likely you will have governmental officials as part of your stakeholder universe. You will have industry affiliations and associations that want something to do, and you want to leverage to do some policy shaping and lobbying. There will be maybe senior politicians you need to have on your stakeholder map, because that industry is heavily regulated. You want to make sure that your share of voice is being, placed at the right levels with the right leaders. And how is a PA supposed to help you with all of that? So that's the second one. And the third one is facilitating cultural familiarization, right? Now, I follow a particular process. Again, my signature year-long journey has got what I call an executive assimilation process. The framework and the methodology I use that I learned when I was working with people. And so what you do with that is you start building trust very early on with your direct reports, and you start to kind of, swing yourself into this infinity loop of feedback with your direct reports. And that will do two things. It will help to set the right level of expectation with both sides, and it will start to build up trust quite early on. Now, these are three activities that anyone can do without hiring myself or yourself or anyone else. They just need to make sure that these processes are attended to and they are being looked after. And in order to do that, you need a little bit of resource. You may need half an FTE or one person in learning and development who is the owner and kind of making sure that this process runs smoothly for the top 100 also.
So here's what I came up with in listening to your presentation. I'd never given any thought to what you're talking about now. But the more you went into it, the more the business case became stronger from the board, from the C-suite, for the entire organization. So the upfront, when you mentioned that the 90% was upfront loaded, and then you look at the value of that coming back on the other side, that framework should be rethought. Because if the ultimate goal is to bring in and reach all the 1, 2s, and 3s, the upfront piece is just a small pittance to get to where we need to get to.
Yes.
And that was kind of the key thing. So as we begin to close out, so what we're going to do is that we will remarket this again on Wednesday for across the globe for HR search kind of folks. What influenced you to shape you how you have become a leader today? So let's put you back in the role of a leader coming in. And what was that progression like? Those leadership skills and things that you thought about to get to where you are.
Okay, so are you speaking about my own leadership journey and what I pay attention to? Yeah. Okay. So first off, I immensely benefited from working with a coach throughout different phases of my own career. Okay. I didn't really use them as a transition coach, but I used them as a leadership coach or a development coach to really look at my strength development areas and my dark side traits as well. And one of them did something super helpful with me, which again, I took over in my coaching practice, which was, a very basic study that's conducted by DDI. And it's got like half circles, 3 of those. And so what it does is it looks at activities that are typically consuming your time, depending on kind of the hierarchy and the level you are in the organization. And why I found that super transformational to my own leadership and my own kind of being was that, you often go through these, role changes, Ron, without really truly realizing what is actually shifted. Not necessarily in job scope or this and that and job title, but in terms of what are the kind of activities that are occupying my time now compared to what I used to do. Now, one of the early kind of failures I see a lot of leaders tapping into, which I have certainly had my own fair share in that. And only when I started working with a coach, I realized that's what the mistake I'm doing was to keep doing what had made me successful so far. Right? Okay. I'll give you the perfect example. So I was super happy, super successful at Navids. And it was an amazing company. It had a family feel to it. It was a culture that was truly developmental and nourishing in nature. By the way, it was a super forgiving kind of a culture. You make mistakes, that's fine. It's part of corporate life, right? Mm-hmm. You learn from it, you move on. Now, I was headhunted and moved to GE, which, as we know, is not the most rosy organization out there.
Yeah.
The big mistake that I did, and I was hired at a mid-level, kind of mid-career recruit, as part of the so-called HR leadership program at GE. And so you needed to have 5 to 7 years of professional work experience to be hired into that layer. What I did, Ron, was to continue doing what had made me successful. And guess what? Not a single one of those moves worked out for me in a positive way. Not only that, I was irritating the heck out of the leaders that I was interacting with. And they were, in return, irritating the heck of me by giving me what they felt is, tough love, which was like a very brutal way of giving, constructive feedback. There was nothing constructive about that feedback. And so I didn't realize, and it's human nature, that if you have been a super successful sales leader and you're appointed to become the managing director, you just carry on doing what you were doing because that just got you the promotion. It can't be so bad. The reality is, if you're making what I call a leadership passage move, so you have been a junior HR person and now you're a middle layer HR person and you're in an organization that's very political, you can't just copy and paste the stuff that's made you successful. You need to reflect, if you can, with a coach or a mentor around how is my new reality going to be different from what I've been doing, and what elements can I continue to do that has made me successful. And so you need to get the mix right between continuing and shape shifting some of what you have done, or doing things entirely in a different way, because that's what the new level passage leadership role requires from you. And that's kind of my very long-winded way of coming back to what you.
That's okay. That's okay. But you know what? It brought us back to our friend Marshall Goldsmith. Marshall's book, I think last book was "What Got You Here Won't Get You There."
Yes. Yes.
And that kind of sums it all up. So, and lots of executives fall into that trap of still using the same MO in a new environment where all the structures are different, but it got you to where you are today. Cool. So thank you so much, man, for making time. Are you here in Dubai now?
I am based in Dubai, yes. I moved to Dubai with my family in August last year, and I work globally. I'm traveling to London next week. I will be traveling to Zurich midway through the week, but I do, have my base now permanently based in Dubai and work internationally.
Okay, so I'm kind of back and forth, Dubai, New York. So I'm going to be in touch, and we'll have a cup of coffee, and we'll talk through outside. Thank you so much for making time for us, and I'll be in touch. So just hang on for a minute as we close out.
Sure. Thank you, Ron, and the team. It's been a pleasure. Really appreciate it.
Awesome.